Well, hey, Hope Young Adults, welcome to Community Conversations. My name is Matt. So glad that you are with us. I want to introduce you to a couple of my dear friends, the great Douglas R. Pace. And can you introduce Abby with the title you've given her?
Oh I literally have no clue. I was thinking about this before. I don't know where the name come from, but this is...
I don't know either.
The Abigail, Miss Waxhaw, 1983 Johnson.
Maybe there's someone that is from Waxhaw, and if you are, welcome. You're invited to this table, and we love you, but...
That's perfect. Yes. There was a point in time I was looking for your email, and I knew what he referred to you as, and I was like, I guess I can try and track down if she was actually like a baby contestant. I don't know.
Gosh.
That would make you super old, though. That would make you my age.
Yeah, I know.
Anyways,
no.
1983 happened, and you weren't there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, today we are having a conversation really about relationships, a little bit about this idea, myth, what some might call it, on the adventure of the one. But before we get into any of that stuff, you guys have some exciting news. You are 2.5 weeks away from
2.5-ish, yeah.
becoming married. That's exciting stuff, big news. So you are engaged. You've been engaged for
6 months.
About 6 months, yeah.
About
Maybe
6
5
months.
and a half, but it'll be 6. Yeah,
All
by the time
right.
we get married.
Yeah.
And planning a wedding with all quarantine things has been awesome and exciting. Getting married on the 7th. And tell us, though, how you met.
Yeah. So I found Abby at a homeless shelter. That's the short way to say it. And when I told one of my good friends that, his question back was she homeless?
Right, well, that's a valid...
Yeah, and she wasn't homeless. But at the time, I worked at a nonprofit, a ministry. We did a lot of inner city ministry called the Raleigh Dream Center. And
Shout out.
Yeah. So I led our homeless ministry, and so I would go down there every Saturday, and I would hang out down there. And I had developed relationships over the course of like 6 months. So like I was down there every Saturday morning faithfully. And one morning I'm down there, and this girl walks in. And it's a men's shelter, so there's not a lot of girls. So this girl walks in.
And most of the men are over the age of 50, 60. It's like an older group.
Yeah. and so this girl walks in, and so I immediately noticed hey, there's a girl here. But the thing that I really noticed, and it kind of honestly made me mad, was she walked around and she acted like she'd known everyone. So I was like, "Who are you? You've never been here before. I know because I'm here every week. This is a lie.
This is my territory."
Yeah. It's like a dog or something. Get out of my territory. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, so I was sitting with the guy I knew the most, and he and I were sitting in the back of the room, and we're just talking. And Abby comes up with a trash bag to pick up trash after the meal. And she comes up, and his name's Manuel, and she's like, "Hey, Manuel." She's like, "Can I take your trash?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah." And so he puts his trash in her bag and talks to him for a second, and then she walks away. And I look at him, and I was like, "Who is that?" And he's like, "I don't know, but if I was you, I'd go get to know her." And it was just challenge accepted. So I was like, "Well, fine, I am. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go talk to her." And so I stood up. And Abby, the room was a square, so Abby went one way around the room, and I went the other way. And in doing so, she was going person to person, getting trash, and I'm not doing that. Yeah. So it took her longer to get around the room. So I go around, and I got to the front of the room, and I started moving boxes that didn't need to be moved. Just to stall, yeah. And eventually, she made it around to me, and just started a conversation with her, and started talking about the Dream Center and serving, and that's how we officially met. And then fast forward, it was my job, and someone interrupted our conversation. I didn't get her number. I had no way to follow up with her, but I gave her the email to the Dream Center. So if you want to get connected to the Dream Center and potentially find your spouse.
Oh, no, he just goes, well, can I say
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I was actually at the shelter that day because I had signed up for a hunger and homelessness class at NC State. So
there we go.
Anyone at NC State, sign up for that class real quick and go pack. But so I was there, and we just signed up for a Saturday to go serve with our professor. And so that's why I was there with a group of 3 other students. And I'm definitely a talker. And so I was like, I just don't want to be stuck behind like a serving line. I want to be able to like talk to people. So the second someone was like, hey, who wants to do trash? I was like, me, because I knew I'd be able to like talk to people. And so that's how I got to talk to Manuel, because he was one of the first people in. And so got to sit down with him for a little bit. And then when he came and approached me, he asked me, where was I from? And I said NC State. And I asked him why was he there? And he said, oh, well, I work with the Raleigh Dream Center. And go back about 2 months or so, that summer I was home, and I was just out of a relationship. I just really felt like I wanted to get involved somewhere. And so I started to Google. I was like, place to volunteer in Raleigh. And the Raleigh Dream Center kept coming up over and over again. Like I would search one day and then 3 days later search, and it was still like the top search. I was like, okay. And so I, read all about their ministry, what they do, and their kids program. And I was like, all right, I guess, Lord, if this is something that you want me to do, just, all right, I'll do it. And so I wrote it down, like volunteer at the Raleigh Dream Center in like my notebook, goals. I have like a goals list of things that I wanted to do that next semester. And that was one of them. And so, when I got back to state, was in my class, and I kind of had put it on the back burner just because, the busyness of school and everything. Sure. And when I went to the shelter and Doug said, I work at the Raleigh Dream Center, it was like almost like a slap in the face, but it was like God shaking me like, I told you need to get involved there. And I was like, oh my gosh.
She got too excited.
I got so excited. Yeah.
And I'm used to like people like, oh yeah, I know what the Dream Center is. And then like I ask them one question and like just that, it crumbles. They have no clue. They're just like telling me that. And she recited the website to me. And it was honestly kind of creepy. And I was like, oh, she actually does know what the Dream Center is. But go ahead.
So anyway, I just was like, just that first interaction, what I remember from that was God using Doug to tell me, this is what I called you to do. You need to do it. It was almost like a wake up, like, okay. So that was my first impression of Doug, was like, God's sent you here to tell me that. I don't know what else is going to come of that, but
my first impression was I thought you were pretty at the homeless shelter.
There you go.
But
that's legit. Well, is Emmanuel? Is he getting an invite?
Oh yeah.
We went over to his apartment the other day.
Yeah, we did.
Well done. So the lesson here is God works through Google, and that is a major endorsement for the Raleigh Dream Center.
Yes.
For sure.
We love them.
Well, so now you're in this other stage of life. You've how long did you date for?
Like a year and a half. You've been engaged for like 6 months. Yeah.
A
year and a half. Some of that during quarantine, right? Which is like that expedites relationships one way or the other. Either you're gonna break up faster or get married faster.
We were states away. Yeah,
I got stuck in Florida for like 2 months, so it kind of put us in like a period where we've been dating for like 3 months, and then I was like stranded in Florida because the world shut down. I got stuck there, and it was like. When you had a lot of time to process and think, like, when I come back, is this something we want to do? Yeah. And so that was kind of cool. It worked out in our favor. But
yeah, it was honestly perfect timing, if there was a perfect time to quarantine. But it worked out,
Yeah. And so you've been engaged for 6 months, getting married in a few weeks. And I don't know if this is a myth, not just in the church, right? There's this idea of there's one person in the world that God has crafted and designed for me, and I am on this journey for them. How? I mean, what are your thoughts on that idea? That's strange, I feel like, even to present to people who are getting married, because there's this romanticized thing around, well, I have found my one, right? Yeah. What are your thoughts on the myth of the one?
I think the first thought that comes to mind is like the classic thing you always hear people say, well, if like one person messes it up, it like messed it up for everyone. Which
the algorithm's broken.
The algorithm's broken. God hacked the Google algorithm and that too. But so I mean, that's the classic thing. But I think there isn't a one per se. I mean, I really do think. I'm not married, but I think marriage and whatever people have told me is really like what you invest into it and what you do and the emphasis you put on it. And I do think, though, that when you do read the Bible, there are people that like God brings together. I think like of like Isaac and Rebecca. But like when you read that story, I think it's not so much Isaac and Rebecca. It's Eliezer of Damascus. And it's the guy that Abraham sent to find a wife for his son. And it was a guy that faithfully went and did what he was called to do. And in that process, he sought the Lord and he asked God to move and do things. And he had a relationship with God, and God put things in his path that ultimately led to Isaac and Rebekah coming together. And so we always talk about the love story, but it's like, no, it was a guy that was just like faithful to do what his job was. It was like faithful to go and find Rebekah, and like, he's like, God, like, let the woman who brings me water be the one, like, you know, and he prayed, but he had put himself in that position. I think when I think of like Abby and I, like, whether one or not, like, we showed up at a homeless shelter and we were just like serving on a Saturday morning. So it's cliche in a lot of ways, but I think, you know, just pursuing the Lord in that is more important than the one. And, you know, you kind of find that person along the way in a sense. So,
yeah. And we were talking about this earlier, and I told you I don't like the illustration.
Yeah.
But the great Ben Stewart, who everybody loves, has this example. And he's not the only one. I've heard it a bunch of times of when looking for whatever that companion is. If I'm focused on Jesus and I'm doing things with God and we're intimately growing or whatever, and then there's also a partner person doing the same thing, and I look to the adjacent side, and I feel like, I don't know if I've ever seen, I mean, you met in serving at a homeless shelter and just connected. So, like, you guys live that out. I make fun of that scenario, but I'm like, what a sweet, beautiful story that Ben Stewart absolutely nailed it. What are, I don't know, your thoughts on the one? I mean, are you looking for completion in a husband or a wife, or are those things you have to fight against a little bit?
Yeah, I think, like, when I think about, like, oh, you have to find the one, I think it, like, puts the pressure on you. Like, it's not up to us to go out and, like, Doug and I talk about, like, when we met each other, neither one of us were in the position or we're actively searching, or, you know, not saying dating sites are bad, but, like, you know, constantly on dating sites or constantly, like, focusing on that. Like, that was not at the forefront of our minds. And so I think it almost, like, takes away, and it kind of creates this, like, distrust that God is not going to bring me someone, or he doesn't want me to be married, or he doesn't want me to have a soulmate, you know? And so it's up to me to go out and search and find, and, like, I think that can become really weary, and so the idea of, like, it's up to you to go and find that person is just really not healthy. And it is not, like, trusting in the Lord and his timing, because he may want to, you know, develop you or do something, or there might be a life event, and, you know, it's just not, you know, up to you, I think. So in that situation, I'm really thankful that, you know, we met so young, because, you know, I was 20, and honestly was coming out of a relationship and just, you know, wasn't expecting to meet Doug. But it was, I think, like, the question that God, like, asked me was, are you willing to, like, sacrifice your plans for my will? Like, even if I didn't think, is this the right time? Like, am I, you know, too young, or I'm doing this? Like, and it was like, okay, Abby, like, let go of, like, your timeline and what you wanted, and you know, just trust that if this is right, God will give you peace about it. He'll guide you to the next step. And so but going back to what you said about, like, finding contentment, I think it's really easy to find contentment in another human. It's very comfortable to do that. It's just, I think, you know, natural, and a lot of people do that. I've done that many times. And so I think going into marriage, that's the one thing that I am almost, like, on guard about, where I'm aware that I can't hold Doug to that, but that is a natural tendency of mine to resort back to. So it's almost like a daily battle to trust in the Lord and find contentment in him and spend time with him. And that is a relationship. Like, Doug and I have a relationship, but my relationship with God is separate. Although, you know, together we are going to be one. I think that is something that has to be prioritized separate, because I can never put that expectation on Doug.
Yeah, I think I think wisdom from the Proverbs is awareness, and even acknowledging that that's a tendency that we fall into. I say we because I've shared this with you guys. I put marriage on a pedestal before I got married. I've been married 10 years now, and we have nearly. We'll get there.
Let's round up.
Yeah, I round up. I've been married 15 years and 5 more years. That'll be great. But I think I put such a pedestal. It was kind of my purpose at one point of like, I really just want to be a dad. I want to be a good husband. And in finding a companion, I'll have some kind of sense of completeness. And those things are not helpful, because what that looks like in a maturing marriage is a lot of codependence issues. And what it really looks like in a personal relationship with the Lord is not dependence on the right thing, but codependence on however Jillian's feeling. Maybe it has major implications on how I feel or whatever, we're going after in our marriage, or not having the confidence to have arguments sometimes. That God's taking care of our marriage because I'm not trusting Him. I'm trusting my ability to prove to my wife that I care about her or whatever. So when you say it's really easy to find contentment in people, that is absolutely true. And I think that's just a battle that you have to be aware of. Do you struggle with that at all, Doug? I know.
Finding contentment. I mean, yes.
You can be honest.
Yeah,
no.
yes and no. So like,
it's really easy for normal people.
But no. Well, yes. So like, the way I got to Raleigh is like a God story in and of itself for another time. But I moved here completely on faith, no job, no nothing. Like literally, I prayed and fasted. God told me to move to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I did it with a few $1,000s, and it has been the journey of a lifetime. So. I say all that to say, like, I went through, and I think this is, like, so crucial for people, and I think this is probably the biggest takeaway I had from, like, being single was, like, when I went through a season of I moved somewhere and I didn't know a single person, there were nights where I literally sat in my 1-bedroom apartment and cried myself to sleep because I would go on, like, social media and see my friends, and, like, I was alone. And so God reorchestrated the way I viewed relationships and contentment in Him and just resting in Him, and really stretched me in that. And it taught me a lot about, not that you don't need other people, but how much you really need God and to be that leading relationship. So in a sense, the reason I said yes and no is no, I learned that lesson a lot. So no, I wouldn't say 100%. But yes, like I'm like anyone else. Like I still seek contentment in Abby or in others, like whatever the relationship or sphere of life is. Like it's a temptation we all fall into that ultimately just leads to like unfulfillment. And so, yeah.
How do you safeguard yourself against that? Like your role as a husband will be to remind Abby that her fulfillment isn't in you. Like, how do you have that conversation? Are you prepared to have those conversations?
Yeah. Well, really early on when we started dating, because I went through that season where I learned, like, it was just me and God, like, really, like, intensely for just months. Like, I remember I looked at Abby, like, multiple times, and I just, like, point blank, I was like, I will never fulfill you. Like, the only thing that will fulfill you is, like, Jesus. And to say that was very freeing from my own sense, and I felt like I was just being honest with her, like up front, like, hey, you gotta know, like if you like look, I'm not gonna be able to, and so, I've done good and bad at that depending on the time and being like intentional with that and like seeking the Lord in my own personal relationship, but that's tough, yeah.
Yeah, Abby, anything?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's something that Doug did bring up at the beginning of our relationship. And so it's almost like that's just been a natural, like, I love you, I'm not going to fulfill you. As easy as saying I love you is, I think that that's something that we talk about because it's just a fact. It's not something that I guess you can hide, or if you do hide, I'm sure it'll come up later in marriage within the first few weeks. Like, hi, is this what you were expecting?
Disappointment happens real quick.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very thankful that you did bring that up, Doug, because that's something that, in past relationships, it wasn't brought up. And then I found myself kind of falling into that. Like if, someone's mad at me or someone's upset, then that's what am I worth anything, you know? And so I think that that's been a really healthy part about our relationship, is that we both have that understanding, and that we, just have to remind each other, hey, like, we're not going to fulfill each other. And, just expressing those expectations at the beginning, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, it sounds like such a biblical approach to doing life with somebody. Mm-hmm. It's not my role to fix you, to fulfill you, or any of those things, but to remind you that you are a daughter of the King. You are a son of the King, and that's just a great foundation to have. What would you say? You have friends who are single. What would you say are things, marriage, especially in the church? Marriage is often perceived as the goal. Like, even here at Hope, like, our typical people that come to Hope are young families, right? Mm-hmm. So the audience is often talked to in this stage of life that's different than a young adult is. This is a young adult podcast. This is for young adults. Sometimes they haven't graduated college yet, or they're in college, or they're young professionals kind of becoming something or developing into what's next. How is it possible to not put marriage on a pedestal and, like, still be satisfied, like that contentment?
Yeah.
What do you do with that? If you want to be in a relationship, you want companionship, what do you do to find contentment in the Lord?
That's a really hard and good question. I would say, like, you said, like, is marriage the goal? And Doug and I just talked briefly about that, because I don't think that marriage is the goal in life. The goal is not to be married. It's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, and then also to advance the kingdom of God and go and make disciples. And that's the goal of a follower of Jesus. But I think that what I found is, with a partner, there can be great advantages, and you can do that better, or have greater influence, or be able to do things that you couldn't do alone. And that's not to say that that's for everyone, because I feel like Paul made that pretty clear, that it is free will. If you desire to be married, then be married, and if you don't, then don't. But you can still love God either way. But I think until you are married, it is just to lay down your life for the Lord. It really, like, it goes back to what we talked about of, trying to find the one and putting that in your own hands, and searching and searching and searching, instead of just giving it to the Lord and say, like, this is my desire. And I truly feel like God will give you the desires of your heart. Like, if, they are good, godly desires, like, if it, obviously not a crazy, horrible thing, but, like, for people that yearn to be married, it's not a sinful thing. And so I believe that God will give you that desire if you earnestly, like, ask and seek Him for that, and letting go the expectation of, like, it has to be done in this timeline or in this year, or I want to be engaged for this amount of time. Like, when you start putting those time constraints on it, it's like you can really miss out from, like, a miraculous thing that God wants to do. And instead of, like, trying to limit, like, a limitless God, like, just give Him the glory of, like, blowing your mind with whoever you're going to marry. And, like, it is going to be, like, the most radical, beautiful thing, like, you've ever seen. And, like, I look at Doug and I'm like, what in the world? Like, this, I'm like, I don't deserve it. Like, I just feel like, what? Like, he's amazing. And I'm just so thankful. But I know, like, that behind that, there's many years of just praying and just being faithful, and just growing strong relationships with your friends and investing in friendships. And I think that's the best thing you can do to prepare for marriage, is to be a great friend, be a great daughter, son, and invest in those relationships before, you get married.
Yeah, that's super significant. Yeah. So you're about to be married. Is there a playbook? Are there tips? I feel like I've heard you say there are.
First tip.
I'm curious.
First tip is that when you play basketball, okay, like, you don't have to have the ball in your hand the whole
gosh.
time,
Okay.
but you gotta be on the court to score. Okay? All right. So going back to how we met, right? Like, I gave Abby the email for the Dream Center, knowing that if she emailed to serve and get connected, it would come to me. And so, long story short, I used my position at my job to go volunteer with a volunteer and get to know her. And I spent like 2 months.
Well, explain that. Volunteer.
Yeah,
at
so
your
we
job.
had like neighborhoods assigned to us, and I couldn't find Abby because she was volunteering in a neighborhood that wasn't the neighborhood I went to. So
He was assigned to one.
Yeah, so I literally reworked my schedule to go volunteer at my own job. So that I could
That's
be.
a hot pursuit.
Yeah. There's not many pretty girls walking a homeless shelter, man. Not many. And so I did that. So I went and I got on the court, right? So like I just got there, and don't be weird. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so I literally served around Abby for like 2 months, just trying to figure out like, hey, do I like to know her? And when the point guard dished the ball to me and it was time to take a shot, I took a shot. Yeah, I took a shot. So you got to be on the court and score, but you don't have to have the ball. So I mean, just go slow. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And back to the question about does what was the previous question we literally just said? Oh, is marriage the goal? Like I just as she was talking, I was thinking about like just practically speaking, we've been together for 2 years and we're like 2.5 weeks away from marriage. And so like if marriage was the goal, I still haven't reached the goal. And that would be miserable just to have sat here the past 2 years. Like if that's my only goal.
Yeah.
So like.
And then what happens after?
Yeah, and then what happens after?
You
Like, I mean, you got there. It's like, all right, now what? So, like, really pursuing God is the only thing that, like, transcends, like, anything you can do here because it's never ending. And the more you get to know God, the cooler you get to find out He is. Let me just 10 out of 10 recommend getting to know Him. But, so be on the court to score. And,
That's great. All right. I don't know how we can revisit this, but Ben Stewart wrote a book.
Okay, all right.
Engaged, married.
Oh, you've read dating.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I have heard her say that you followed his tips to a T.
Yeah.
Factual?
Factual.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I didn't read the book. Hope did give it to me though for free. I didn't read the book. I went and
I didn't know there was a book.
He wrote a book.
Series.
Yeah, wrote a book.
I just listened to the sermons.
But it's what's the name of his church? Passion City. But it's the DC one. Yeah. So it's like in 2019, you can go back on like Apple or whatever and find the podcast. And he just like preached a sermon. Like each one was a sermon. So I listened to him, and it's like the spark notes of the book. And he talks about like basically there's like a playbook that he used. He ran the largest college ministry in the country. It was at Texas A&M University. So he dealt with the topic a lot. Giggle. 12th man. It'll get you. Alabama. He kind of lays out this playbook, and there was just like little things, and there were honestly like little psychological tips. Like there was one that really stuck out, and it's like when you get to like the end of the second or third date, it's almost like you do like a DTR, and like he like advises you get to like the end of the date, like if it's going well, you kind of like look at her and like, hey, like I'm not like looking to get married today or anything like that, but I'm not like here to like waste my time, and I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I would like the opportunity to just like continue to get to know you, and like if that's cool, like I would really appreciate that. If that's not, it's okay, I'll walk away. And it's like it's tips like that, and what it is when you like stop and think about it.
Again.
Yeah. How did that speak to you when you heard?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I received it. I was so thankful that he said that because, like, I know Ben Stewart talks about it. Like, women need clarity. Like, clarity. Yes, thank you. Like, whenever.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing. Yeah.
Yes, like, planning a date. Like, when are we gonna go on the next date? Awesome. Okay. Who's going to reach out to who? You're going to text me? Great. Like, are you going to pick me up or am I going to get you? Like, that is attractive. Like, when we get clarity, because it doesn't leave you in this ambiguous state of like, what are we? Is this even a date? Does he even like me? Like, and then it's confusing to me. And so actually I had also listened to Ben Stewart before. And so had loved, absorbed and just loved all of his teachings on relationships because I was like, I need all the advice I can get. And when Doug did it to a T, I was like, this is weird. Like, this is exact. I was like, do all guys know this? Or like, is this just like Doug just is
Only
like
Doug,
exceeding above the rest? Like, I don't know.
I stole it all.
It was, so I really
all.
appreciated it because it really left me like confident in the stage we were at in our relationship and just really valued by Doug and again in a sense of like clarity about where we were at. So
Yeah, that's another thing he talks about. Like when you ask a girl, like he's like explicitly use the word date. He's like,
Please.
don't say like hang out or something like that because it's like kind of like ambiguous. And he talks about like he's like if you say date, like the girl knows what to expect, like knows how like to get ready, get dressed. If you say hang out, it's like what is this? And it's like psychological torture and stuff. And it's just like little things like that along the way that he shares. And they really were beneficial, and I may have did a lot of them to the T.
Well done.
So,
and it's worked.
It worked. It worked. It worked just like he said it would, too. That's what was weird.
okay, well don't put that expectation on
It's a
it.
formula.
Yeah.
But definitely go listen to Ben Stewart.
He's an expert. He wrote a book for a reason.
I need to read that book.
I listened to the sermon.
Yeah, that works too. The book's a safe. I mean, he wrote a message for the sermon series, and then he's like, I can turn this into a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you guys being here. Congratulations. Excited to see you guys get married, and then knowing that that's not the end game, and like this identity of who I am and in Christ, and who I am as daughter, who I am as son, and how I can remind my spouse of that. Like that's just encouraging to see from a distance, right? To witness as people who care about you, that knowing that there's something so much further beyond as ministry and as you grow in loving one another. So that's super exciting. Thanks for sharing your story about Emmanuel and he's showing up.
Yeah, he's a special guy. We love Emmanuel.
Yeah, I was telling him, you never know what one conversation you may have, how it affect everything. If it wasn't for him being there that day, not wanting to be at the shelter at that time, obviously, in his life, but literally changed the course of our lives. And so you never know. It really is all about the one.
We're going to put the Raleigh Dream Center link in the bio. You can go serve.
The info
Absolutely. It's going to be good. Well, thanks for being here, guys.
Awesome.
We're excited for you. And we will see you next week on Community Conversations.